In the blistering heat of the Arizona Territory, where the sun scorched the earth like an unrelenting forge and the wind whispered secrets through the canyons, a lone rancher named Elias Thorne rode his weary horse across the vast expanse of his isolated spread. The year was 1887, and Elias had long since grown accustomed to the solitude of the Wild West, his days filled with the endless toil of herding cattle and mending fences under a sky that seemed to stretch into eternity. But on that fateful afternoon, as he crested a rocky ridge near the edge of his property, he spotted something unnatural, a crumpled figure half buried in the dust, shrouded by a tattered blanket that fluttered weakly in the breeze. Drawing closer, he realized it was a woman, her face pale and etched with desperation, her eyes wide with terror as she clutched the edges of the blanket to the ground. "Please, don't lift it," she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible over the howl of the wind, but Elias, driven by a mix of curiosity and concern, reached down anyway, his calloused hands gripping the fabric. As he pulled it back, he froze in shock, his blood turning to ice in his veins. What lay beneath was not what he expected, and in that moment, the rugged rancher's world shattered, pulling him into a tale of hidden pain, redemption, and the fragile threads of human connection that could bind even the most broken souls. If you believe in the power of kindness and the beauty of second chances, hit that like button right now, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of hope, and don't forget to subscribe to Moments of Love for more heart-touching stories that celebrate the human spirit. Elias Thorne was a man forged by the harsh realities of the frontier, a widower in his mid-40s whose life had been stripped bare by loss and isolation. Years earlier, he had buried his young wife, Amelia, after a sudden fever claimed her during a brutal winter, leaving him with only the ghosts of their shared dreams echoing through his modest cabin. He had thrown himself into the rhythm of ranch life, his broad shoulders bearing the weight of solitude like a yoke, his heart armored against the vulnerabilities that had once nearly destroyed him. The land was unforgiving, demanding constant vigilance against rustlers, wild animals, and the unpredictable whims of nature, droughts that turned pastures to dust, storms that flooded arroyos overnight. Yet, on this day, as he stared down at the revelation beneath the blanket, all his hardened resolve cracked like parched earth under rain. There, nestled in a shallow depression scooped from the dirt, was a small child, no more than 5 years old, her tiny body emaciated and feverish, her skin marred by bruises that spoke of unspeakable cruelty. The woman, who introduced herself later as Clara Hayes, collapsed beside the girl, her own frame gaunt from exhaustion and fear, her dress torn and stained from what must have been weeks of desperate flight across the wilderness. Clara's story unfolded in fragments over the following days, as Elias carried them both back to his ranch, the child, named Lily, cradled gently in his arms while Clara stumbled alongside, her eyes never leaving her daughter. She had been married to a brutal man named Harlan, a gambler and outlaw who roamed the saloons of Tombstone, his temper as volatile as dynamite in a mine. Harlan's fists had been her constant companion, his jealousy a chain that bound her to a life of shadows and silence. But when his rage turned toward little Lily, after a night of heavy drinking where he accused Clara of infidelity with no evidence but his own paranoia, she knew she had to escape. Under the cover of darkness, she had bundled her daughter into a stolen wagon, fleeing westward with nothing but a few scraps of food and the blanket that had become their only shield against the elements. The journey had been a nightmare of starvation and pursuit, Harlan's cronies on their trail, whispers of bounty hunters echoing through dusty towns. Clara had pushed on, her body aching from endless miles, her mind frayed by the constant dread that one wrong turn could end it all. Lily's health had deteriorated rapidly, a cough turning into a rattling fever that sapped her strength, forcing Clara to hide in the canyons, begging the heavens for mercy that never seemed to come. As Elias tended to them in his sparse cabin, the challenges mounted like storm clouds on the horizon. Lily's condition worsened at first, her small chest heaving with labored breaths, and Elias, drawing on memories of nursing his wife through her final days, rode through the night to fetch a doctor from the nearest settlement, a grueling 20-mile trek that left his horse lathered and himself near collapse. The doctor, a grizzled old-timer named Doc Wilkins, arrived with poultices and tonics, diagnosing the girl with a severe infection brought on by exposure and malnutrition. Clara watched over her daughter like a sentinel, her hands trembling as she applied the remedies, her eyes filling with tears each time Lily whimpered in pain. Elias found himself drawn into their orbit, his routine disrupted by the sudden presence of life in his empty home, the sound of Clara's soft humming as she rocked Lily, the faint scent of wildflowers she carried from the trail. But the ranch itself posed its own threats. A band of rustlers had been spotted in the area, drawn by rumors of Elias's thriving herd, and he spent sleepless nights patrolling the fences, his rifle at the ready, all while worrying about the vulnerable souls under his roof. Suspense built as whispers of Harlan's pursuit reached the ranch through travelers passing by, a rough-looking stranger in town asking about a woman and child matching Clara's description, posters tacked to saloon walls offering a reward for their return. Clara's fear was palpable, her body tensing at every distant hoofbeat, her nights plagued by nightmares that left her waking in cold sweats. Elias, feeling a protective instinct awaken within him, fortified the cabin, boarding up windows and setting traps along the perimeter, but the emotional toll weighed heavily. He grappled with his own demons, memories of Amelia's death resurfacing like ghosts in the firelight, making him question if he could bear another loss. Clara, too, struggled with trust, her past betrayals making her wary of Elias's kindness. Was it genuine, or would it turn like Harlan's had? Yet, in quiet moments, as Lily began to mend under their care, small bonds formed, Elias teaching Clara how to mend a saddle, her sharing stories of her childhood on a distant farm, their hands brushing accidentally and lingering just a second too long. Change came gradually, like the first rains after a drought, nourishing the parched soil of their lives. Lily's fever broke one dawn, her eyes opening clear and bright for the first time in weeks, a weak smile crossing her lips as she reached for her mother's hand. Clara wept openly then, her relief mingling with gratitude toward Elias, who stood awkwardly in the doorway, his rough exterior hiding the swell of emotion in his chest. The ranch began to transform. Clara took to helping with chores, her strength returning as she milked cows and tended the garden Elias had long neglected. The land, once a symbol of his isolation, now echoed with Lily's tentative laughter as she played in the yard, chasing butterflies under the watchful eyes of her guardians. But the shadows of the past loomed larger. Harlan's men closed in, a skirmish erupting one stormy night when 3 riders stormed the property, guns blazing in the darkness. Elias fought back fiercely, his shots precise from years of frontier living, wounding one and scattering the others, but not before a bullet grazed his arm, blood soaking his shirt as Clara bandaged him by lantern light, her touch gentle and revealing the depth of her growing affection. In the aftermath, as the authorities were summoned and Harlan's fate sealed by his own reckless pursuit, captured in a nearby town after a botched robbery, the true turning point arrived. Elias confessed his fears to Clara under a starlit sky, admitting how Amelia's loss had hollowed him out, how he had vowed never to let anyone close again. Clara, in turn, shared the depths of her despair, how she had nearly given up in that canyon, begging Elias not to lift the blanket not out of secrecy, but out of shame for failing to protect her child. Their vulnerabilities intertwined, forging a connection stronger than the iron of Elias's branding tools. Lily flourished, her bruises fading like old memories, and the ranch became a haven, a place where second chances bloomed amid the sagebrush. Elias proposed to Clara one crisp autumn morning, not with grand gestures, but with a simple ring carved from a piece of Amelia's old jewelry, symbolizing the blending of past and future. They built a life together, facing the Wild West's trials as a family, their love a beacon against the vast, untamed horizon. As the sun set on their story, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and tenderness, one couldn't help but feel the profound impact of that single act of defiance, lifting the blanket that revealed not just shock, but the possibility of healing. In a world as harsh as the frontier, where survival often meant hardening one's heart, Elias and Clara proved that vulnerability could be the greatest strength, that kindness could rewrite even the darkest chapters. If this tale of redemption and love has touched your heart, as it surely touched mine in the telling, please like this video, share it with those who need a spark of hope, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that remind us of the beauty in broken places. And before we part, I have a special request. Comment below with the line, "Kindness changes everything." If you felt the emotion in Elias and Clara's journey, let's spread that message far and wide.